Youth sports can be really hard, especially if you're wanting to raise your kid in ways that produce healthy adults when they're done playing. Each week on Healthy Sports Parents, we have conversations designed to help you keep your athlete mentally and emotionally healthy. Whether you're just starting out in rec ball or you're traveling every weekend to elite tournaments, we're here to help you strengthen your relationship with your kids through sports. If we haven't met, my name is Jonathan Carone, and I'm the host of the show. Today, we're joined by my friend, Dr. Jenna Wallace. Dr. Wallace is a pediatric psychologist who specializes in the diagnosis and treatment of neurodevelopmental disorders, including autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, learning disability, and other intellectual disabilities. She spent the first part of her career in academic medicine, but in 2024, she opened Unlocked Potential, a psychology practice in Fairmont, West Virginia, where she sees children and young adults ranging from birth all the way to 22 years old, including the evaluation of college student athletes who are seeking academic accommodations. So Dr. Wallace is an incredible psychologist. So she comes at it from that background, but she's also a Division I softball player. So she's able to take the perspective of both of those. And that's what we're going to talk to her today about, is how do we look at things from the psychology standpoint, but also the competition standpoint and all of that. Before we get to the conversation, though, if you like today's episode, please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, it'd be a huge help if you wrote up a small review. If you watch on YouTube, make sure to hit that like and that subscribe button. Last of all, if this episode helps you, the best way to help us grow the show is to share the episode with a friend. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and say hey to Dr. Wallace. Dr. Wallace, thanks for being here. Say hey to everybody real quick.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me, John.
Hey, so before we get into all your other qualifications and all the things you bring to the table, we do this every week, but we want to meet mom first. Can you tell us a little bit about your kids, what they play, and what it's like being mom to them?
Sure. Yeah, I have three amazing daughters. My oldest is 11. She's academically gifted, incredibly cerebral kid, right? She is our thinker, our learner. All the parents in the neighborhood always joke because she walks home from the bus reading a book like Belle from Beauty and the Beast. She's just really awesome. She's played a lot of different sports over the years and tried to dabble in a lot of different things. Right now, she's super into volleyball and has just started her second season in club volleyball. She's started with dance, moved to gymnastics, then soccer, then basketball. She's done golf and tennis, and she also really loves softball. And my middle daughter is 5. She is our spunky, carefree, happy-go-lucky, spontaneous kid. She, so far, has been the one who's shown the most interest in sports. I guess if you ask my husband, she's the one that's shown the most athleticism as well. She's very artistic and free-spirited. She loves to draw and do all kinds of craft projects. So she has just started getting into sports in the last couple of years. She's done tumbling, golf, tennis, soccer, basketball, t-ball. She's the kid that whenever a season comes up, she's ready to do it and wants to join in. And then my youngest is 3. She is very clearly intended to be the youngest child. She is really, really spunky, very strong-willed, independent. I think that when she gets to playing sports, that she will be our fiercest competitor of all. She's definitely the kid that I could see playing field hockey or ice hockey or football. And she really loves to do what her sisters are doing. So we're really excited, actually, I think this year, because my husband and I are planning on coaching her t-ball team, or coaching the 5-year-old's t-ball team. I think we're going to let the 3-year-old join in just to see how she likes it.
I want video of that, please.
Oh,
I just want to
yeah.
see your husband coach t-ball.
Yeah. It's definitely, and we've coached separately over the years because, maybe I was pregnant and he was coaching, or I was the one asked to coach, and us coaching together will be an experience for sure.
Yeah, so I gotta pull the veil back real quick, because the thing that you got to know as a listener here is I've been in a group chat with her husband since like 2012, 2013. We went to school together. So I think when I first met Doug, I was thinking about this yesterday. It was an intensive class, and like one of those January classes where you're there in a week. He was the cool baseball player who was too cool to be in the classroom, didn't care. But I didn't notice him. I didn't know him until the day he leaned back in a chair and fell down in the back of class. I
Did
don't know
he
if you knew that.
really?
Yes.
No.
Yes. I was thinking about that. Yes. So like when I say I want to watch your husband coach T-ball, that's why. He's a Division I baseball player who might be the cockiest person I've ever met, but like is a great dude. But I would just love to watch his patience be pushed trying to teach 4-year-olds how to play baseball.
Yeah, and I think, that just goes back full circle to like being parents and how we as humans have changed over the years because, both of us are very competitive people. Both of us are very outgoing people. He has always been very self-assured and confident. And in these settings, like you're watching us like try to manage being our former selves and our current selves, right? He was the guy who in college would break a golf club. And I was like, who is this psycho? Why is he doing these things? And now to watch him be able to like manage that and be a good example for the kids, it's really cool. It also kind of speaks to some of that brain development that occurs as we go from being children to being adults.
We're a little different at 21 than we are at 38, 39. So, yeah.
That's the hope.
One of the things, though, that he has told me before is about your oldest. And we were last fall, I've mentioned on the show before some of the stuff that we dealt with my daughter with her soccer team. But in that group chat, we were talking about like how to deal with that with parents and kids. And it's a group chat, a couple of former players. And so I really value their opinions with stuff like that. But one of the things that Doug said was that your oldest has a ton of talent, but not a ton of desire to be great. And he was just telling me like how he was empathizing with me, how like frustrated that can be, like when a kid like has potential, but they just don't really care. So I know your background. I've seen your competitive side. So I'm really interested in how you navigate parenting her, because there's probably 3 competing parts going on in your brain. There's Jenna, the high-level softball player. There's Jenna, the mom who wants the best for her daughter. And then there's Dr. Wallace, the trained child psychologist. So like, how do you balance those 3 parts as a parent when you're watching your kids play sports growing up?
Yeah. I think this has been a really interesting journey for me. And like you said, our oldest, not only is she naturally kind of skilled athletically, she's got some of the things that you look for physically. She's big for her age. I mean, her foot size is the same as my foot size as an 11-year-old. And she's got a lot of power, just like I did. But also she is very similar to me in that she is the thinker. She's the very cerebral, as I mentioned before. And I think the thing that a lot of people don't know about children who are academically gifted is sometimes when we think about gifted kids, we think about perfectionism, which is true. But what we also see is that they tend to be very averse to things that are challenging for them. And so when I think about my oldest daughter, and as the psychologist and putting on that hat, I've really had to reframe a lot of the reasons why my husband and I were getting frustrated in the beginning years, because what we were seeing was this kid who wasn't trying, who was goofing off, or who was acting silly in situations where the other kids seemed to be honed in. But what I've discovered over the years is the first time you teach her, she gets it, right? She understands it. And if she has to practice something, or if she has to try hard to be good at it, it often like leads her to shut down. So we had a couple of pretty tough rec ball seasons, not just in one sport. Obviously with softball, she got to the place where she wanted to pitch. And I was a pitcher, a left-handed pitcher. My husband was a left-handed pitcher. And so we were so excited that she showed interest in it, but she didn't want to work. And pitching is one of those skills that if you don't put in reps after reps after reps, you're not going to be able to do even the simplest things. And we weren't looking at like her being a standout pitcher. I just wanted her to be able to throw a strike every now and then when we were playing 8 and 10U. And it just wasn't happening. It wasn't clicking. And I was very upset. So last year it kind of came to a head where I realized that what was very frustrating to me as a parent was the lack of effort and the lack of positive attitude going towards it. And I was a mirror of that. And I think oftentimes as parents, when we see these things, we reflect that back to our kids. I was frustrated. I was upset. I was lecturing her after practices and after games. And we had a come to Jesus meeting where I said to her, I don't care if you don't want to play sports. We have a non-negotiable one sport per season rule. That can be an individual sport like tennis, it could be golf, it could be anything that they want it to be, but I just feel it's very important for discipline and activity for them to continue to be involved in something. But when she and I had a conversation that was very stern about her attitude and her effort, we saw a huge shift in what we're seeing with her on the court now. So I think for me, I mean, that's a roundabout way of like the athleticism, the piece that I was initially so focused on of like, you have all of this potential as an athlete. I really had to reflect back on, I want you to have all of this potential as a person. And the things that are going to make you a good person are your attitude and your effort, not whether or not you can throw a ball further than all these other kids. There's a lot of pressure when you're a former elite athlete to when people say that, they'll be like, this coach was a Division I softball player. And so there's a lot of pressure of, well, my kid also needs to be a standout because otherwise I look like an idiot. And I realized that a lot of those thoughts were just reflecting on me and my problems, and they were not her and her problems. And we've really just seen such a shift in everybody's attitudes and enjoyment of sport.
So I relate a lot to what you said about the high achiever, high academic. That was me as a kid. Like if it didn't come, the reason I never was great at any sport was because if it didn't come easy to me, I didn't know how to work hard to get there because so many other things came easy to me that it's just like, all right, if that's not easy, I'm going to go to the other things that are. And both of my kids are getting to that point now. Like my daughter, who's in 4th grade, she started the AIG type of stuff this year because her academics are so high. My son jokes that him and one other kid are the 2 smartest kids in 2nd grade in his school, and it's true. He's like 99th percentile and all the stuff, and they're good at what they play, but once they can't do something, it's almost like they get offended they can't do it. At least that's what it looks like on the outside. So if you were counseling me as a parent, how would you tell me or suggest I coach or parent my kids to put in the effort when they are those high achieving kids who don't naturally do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, though, I think we have to take a moment to reflect on the fact that prepubescent children are physically developing along a very similar trajectory across the board, right? And, you know, barring if they have like some sort of medical issues, but like we put together all of these kids, that's why we have these stages of development, right? Their bodies are learning to skip around age 5. They're learning to run faster and harder at specific ages. So when it comes to all of those physical things, I think parents need to understand that a lot of that comes out in the wash once they hit puberty, right? You could have the best 7-year-old baseball player in the world, but guess what? When he turns 16, if he's still 5'9", he might not be able to play X position, or you might have the best girl basketball player in the world. She may not grow past 5 feet, and that's okay. But you have to realize that like when we set these expectations for kids very early on of who they're going to be based on their skill set when they're little, we're just really doing them a disservice. So I think that the thing that parents, when we're coaching our young kids, have to focus on is those things that are within their control, whether that be attitude, effort, practicing and rehearsing and kind of redoing skills is very important. But guess what? It's also super boring to kids to do drills when they don't understand why they're doing drills and they don't understand why we are so frustrated that they're not doing them correctly. So I find as a parent and as a coach, it's most helpful if I lay the educational groundwork, don't give lectures, but saying, hey, we are doing this drill because it breaks down this part of a movement that we need to do over and over again for our brains to get really good at doing that movement. And if we practice the big movement, there's a lot of little things that can go wrong during that process. And so what we've got to do is do the little things over and over again to make them big. And then it's up to us to take those skills and make them fun and make them engaging and not make them just be this monotonous, because we know a lot of brain science and we know a lot of information about muscle memory, but the kids don't, and they're there for a very different purpose than what we're there for. I think it's also really important for your kids to have conversations with you about what their why is. So if you are going out as a coach, as a parent, because your why is to have the best kid on the team, but your kid's why is to make friends or to go out there and have a fun Saturday, there's a mismatch there that we're just going to be causing tension and strife and a lot of stress. Whereas if you can match your expectations and your goals to theirs, then we can start to shift that over time. Maybe you start with a 12U player that is just out there to have fun, and then they really catch the bug and they enjoy it. A lot of parents think that 12U is kind of too late now in this sports parent world, but the reality is there are kids who are college athletes who didn't start playing their sport until much later because they just grew that passion for it and they were able to catch up.
Yeah, we've got a family friend who is, I think it's 11U, but he played soccer like really early, like 6, 7 years old, went away from it because he was more into baseball and football, or baseball and basketball, excuse me. Got to middle school and wasn't playing anything in the fall. He's like, hey, let me try out for soccer. I remember I played soccer, and because he was so athletic, he made the team as a sixth grader and then fell in love with soccer that sixth grade year and will now say that soccer is his favorite sport. Mm-hmm. But he's known as a basketball and a baseball player. It's just, it took him a while to develop the desire to want to play soccer. But once it clicked in his head, that's all he wants to do now. And he's got a soccer ball with him all the time.
Volleyball is still my favorite sport. I played college softball, but I'm 5'6". I was very fortunate to even be recruited to be a Division I softball player at that height. But I went with the sport that I was better at. So, but I still would say if you gave me a softball right now, I'd be like, get lost. I want to play volleyball.
So with the kids who you mentioned breaking it down and trying to teach it and all of those things, which makes a ton of sense. But when it doesn't come easy to them and they want to give up because there are so many things that are easy, mm-hmm. and at 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, they haven't learned what it's like to push through the hard to get to a goal. Mm-hmm. How do we connect with them on their level to motivate them to go through the hard stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I didn't really answer that earlier.
No, you're fine.
I think a lot of that happens off the court and off the field. Oftentimes when we have very intelligent children, we praise them for their intelligence. We say, you are so smart, you do so well in school, and we're focusing so much on the end result and not so much on the process. So I always encourage parents to praise their hard work and their effort. I see you working so hard, and pointing out throughout the day obstacles that they have overcome, because oftentimes when there's a successful end result, kids don't pay attention to that process, which is normal. Our brains go to the end game. But if we can say, hey, like, I know that friendship issue that you had was really challenging for you, and I saw you keep working at it. I saw this thing that you did do on the field, and you kept working at it. A lot of the things that we think about as parents, we try to do reactively of like, my kid is not working hard in practice, now what do I do? That should have happened years ago, right? That's a work in progress. There's not so much that you can do in that moment short of bribing them to get them to put forth that effort if they just don't have the intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation really does come from seeing yourself having success in challenging situations over time. So, I mean, I think it's a challenging thing. I think that for myself, reflecting back, I am one of those people that even though things did come very easily for me, I was very perfectionistic and really hard on myself. And that drove me to continue to practice and be better and work harder. But you can't make those intrinsic properties just be there without fostering those things for your kids.
That's really good. Yeah. As I've seen my kids, like once they do it once, that's when they're like, oh, I can do it. And I enjoyed that feeling. It's just convincing them to put forth the effort to get to it that first time. And like, sometimes it's work, sometimes, because my daughter is very much like me in that, like, super smart, creative, like things come naturally to her to an extent. So like she's athletically, she is above average naturally, but nowhere near great. Like she's not that super athletic, like going to blow you out of the water, but like she goes out there, she can do pretty much anything she wants and be pretty decent at it. She ran a 5K at 7 years old. Like those type of things, like she can just do it, but she's like, no, I don't want to. Like, but it's like, but once she does it, it's like, oh, that felt really good. And having to remind her of those feelings, because I think for her, and tell me if I'm onto something here, because I'm just making it up as I go. But for her, she experiences so many of those I did it type of moments. Like she has a project in class. She did well. She got a good grade. She has this. She did well. She got a good result, whatever it might be. That I think she often forgets that she was able to go through and do the other thing. And so she doesn't have that. It's almost like there's too many things going on for her to remember that, oh yeah, I've done that before and I can do it again.
And some of that as parents can come at the dinner table of like reflecting on, hey, do you remember when you started kindergarten, you couldn't read at all, right? And then you practiced reading. I watched you. I helped you with flashcards. We learned sight words. We did all of these things. And now look at you. Reading is so easy for you. And it may seem like it's just always been easy because you've done it so many times. But guess what? It wasn't easy at first. And really like pointing out adversity that we usually overlook in their everyday lives and having these genuine conversations with kids. So after a practice, after a game, what went well? What did you feel like didn't go well? Was there something that you wish you could do differently? I noticed that it seemed like during that time you weren't as interested. What's going on with that? And being able to just open up those conversations and giving kids credit that they really do have a lot going on inside their heads that sometimes we have no idea about. It could just be as simple as, Susie told me last week I couldn't do that, and so now I don't want to do it. You really just need to ask those questions and have those conversations to get to the bottom of where the blocks are and what's going on.
This next question wasn't in our notes, so I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but you mentioned earlier the importance of learning what our kids' goals are. Why are they wanting to play? And being honest with ourselves about why we want them to play. And one of the things I've noticed as we've started to promote the show and put some clips out there from other interviews, the responses I get are often parents who I think don't even realize that what they're doing is their own personal motivations and desires, not their kids. Yeah. And so for the parent who hasn't taken the time to actually ask themselves, like, what are my goals for this? Why am I doing this? Am I wanting something different than the kid? That's a hard thing to do that mental work, especially in our 30s and 40s and however old the person is. What advice can you give to that parent to go into that, asking those questions and how to deal with the fact that, okay, I want this. If I'm honest, like I want to sit at every practice because I like watching my kid practice, but my kid needs the space to be a kid and not have me around. But what they want and what I want are competing. How do we manage that and be really honest with ourselves? And like, what would you say to those parents just to encourage them or help them out?
Well, I'd start with this personal anecdote, and I'll say my parents did not force me to do anything. My parents were incredibly supportive of my drive and desire, and I wanted to play Division I softball. That was my goal. I wanted to be a Division I athlete. I learned a lot about myself in the years that I played softball in college, and I met my husband in college. I credit a lot of things to my ability to get a scholarship to go to college. But Division I softball was the hardest and most emotionally scarring thing that I have ever done in my life. And I say that because it's not all rainbows and butterflies. It is really not glamorous behind the scenes. You see as a spectator, as a fan, and maybe even as a former athlete, depending on what level, what school, what coach you had, you see the glitz and glamour. You see the beauty of like they're on TV, they're playing in all of these, they have all this gear, they do all of these things. Let me tell you, nobody cares at this point in my life at 35 whether I played Division I softball or played rec softball. You guys, you're the first person to ask me to speak about my experience in probably 15 years. So I say that to say that if that is your goal as a parent and it is not your child's goal as a parent, you are doing them a disservice, and you may be leading them into something that could be very traumatic. And it could be big T traumatic, like could be something really bad happens, or could be little T traumatic where a lot of, things happen that were scarring and upsetting or whatever it may be. I don't blame anyone for that. I think I had expectations of myself that were too high. I was a big fish in a small pond that went on to be a small fish in a big pond. And it just was, there were a lot of things that occurred that I wish I could have done my life without. I did become a stronger person for that. So
hey, let me interrupt real quick just to feel it. Because if I'm not mistaken, your high school, 1A, 2A, like pretty small. Is that right?
I don't know how they equate with, because, every state is different. But yeah, there were like 850 kids in my high school.
Okay, yeah.
So I think 2A.
I remembered you being around the same size my high school was. So it's like
yeah,
the best player at a 2A school is a good player.
Yeah.
But then you go to Division I and it's like, oh.
Right.
Yeah.
I was the first Division I athlete from a Division I scholarship athlete to come out of my high school. I had played on very, very competitive travel ball teams starting. I didn't start travel ball till 12U, plug for that, because guess what? Before puberty, again, we're all still developing so much. But I went on in 14 and 16U to play with some teams that were mostly had Division I recruits on them. And so we were national champions, blah, blah, blah. And that is what led to me being recruited. And when we got there, I just wasn't the right fit for the program in a lot of ways. And even though I had moments that were stellar, I also had moments that were, not stellar. And the emotional piece of that is kind of separate, kind of related to all of it. But I think I say that to say that your goals have to be aligned with your child's goals. And if your child doesn't have goals yet, that's okay to continue to foster athleticism. But we've really got to focus on what is important, what skills we're trying to teach our children in that process. My daughter's club coaches said something really beautiful the other day, and I really appreciated it. They said, we are the tough love coaches. We are the ones who are going to tell you when you're doing something right. We're also going to get on you when you're doing something wrong. We need you to be the loving parents that after the tournament is over, it's over. And we will handle things in practice that didn't go the right way. We will handle things that we need to do better, and we will coach your kids. We need to be the coaches. You need to be the ones who say, hey, you had a really good attitude. You put forward, I saw you working hard and pointing out the good things that your kids did. And I was like, I love that, because a lot of times we have this idea in our culture that we have to be tough on our kids, or they're going to be soft, or they're not going to be able to be good enough. And if you've got the coaches who are telling your kids what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong, you've just got to be the person who's like, cool, did you have a good time? What did you learn during practice? But you asked the question about really that selfish intent, and it's very natural, and we see our kids biologically and otherwise as an extension of ourselves, and they really truly are, and we want to be proud of them, and we want to see what they're doing, and we want to be involved, but we are doing them a disservice when we are not teaching them skills to be independent. Because that's one of the things that I think is so valuable in sports, is to learning how to think when nobody's telling you what to think, learning how to be a problem solver, learning how to be a teammate, learning how to listen to instruction and follow instruction. All of those things are character building, that when we are constantly part of that and we're not allowing them that opportunity to kind of move past this boundary that we've created with them, then we're not giving them the opportunity to be independent humans. And we all know people who are brilliant and have great minds, but have no adaptive skills at all, right? They can't do their laundry. They can't do all of the simple things. And I think as parents, we've got to be able to say, okay, one of my goals is for my kids to be independent and to be able to survive in this world. Your kids don't need you to tell them that the world is a cruel place and to show them that the world is a cruel place through your actions. They need you to teach them the skills to overcome challenges.
You mentioned the independent idea, and I think it's such a great way to frame it, because parents are often, one of the things in a couple episodes ago, Brad Raby said was that the parents' number one goal is to cheer, 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 not to coach from the stands, not to do all this stuff. And one of the responses we got from that is, well, if I'm not telling them what to do, who's going to tell them what to do?
Their coach.
And well, with the coach, or even like the idea that, and I think that, I don't know if this term is new, but it's something that I think a lot of people don't think about. It's the idea of joysticking, of telling kids where to go, what to do, how to do it in a game. Because we're so focused on the outcome of the game and their performance, we feel like we have to tell the kid exactly what to do, as opposed to giving them space to make the wrong decision in a game so that they can learn from it and then make the right decision the next time. If we tell them when to pass the ball, where to go, what to do every single play, they're never going to have to think about it on their own, learn from the mistake, and move forward in that way. And so the way you phrase that as like, we've got to allow our kids to become independent thinkers so they survive on their own. I think sports gives such a avenue and a vehicle for that, if we can set aside our desires and our comfort to let our kids be in a safe position to fail.
Right. That's part of sports. And I started coaching rec ball a couple of years ago. And one of the things that I noticed right away was that, and this happened again this past season, everybody knows everybody. I'm relatively new to the system because this is my first kid going through it. And there's a lot of, I know these kids, so I'm going to put them on my team. Very understandable. But it's rec ball. And if your goal in rec ball is to win, and you're keeping your kids in the same position every game, and you're not allowing them opportunities to learn new positions, learn new things, play when you've never played before, right? If we're sticking the kid who's never touched a softball before in right field and making her stay there the entire 10U season, you are not teaching them. If your goal is winning, they're gonna win. Those teams beat me every year. They really do. And I pick kids based on A, their parents, and B, their attitude and effort during tryouts. I don't care about anything else. I don't care. I can fix your swing. I can fix your throw. I can do any of these things. But what I need to see is the soft skills. And the same thing's going to go if your kid does move on and want to play at the college level. Those coaches, guess what they're doing in the stands when they go to those tournaments? They are watching you, and they're watching what your kid does when they sit on the bench. But I think it's so important to reframe. If your goal is winning, you're going to be disappointed. You're going to be disappointed because even if your team is a winning team, if that's all your goal is, you're going to have bad attitudes, you're going to have bad parents, you're going to have issues, because that's not what developmental sports should be about. Now, competitive sports, different story, but I think it's so important to work on character.
I am guilty of putting kids in the spot that's best for them and staying there the whole season. I had a couple kids a season or two ago on our, I think it was U10 soccer team. It's like, okay, that kid is best at a defender. They don't do what they need to do to play offense. They run around. And in my mind, I wanted them to have success. So I put them in the spot that I was most successful then. Mm-hmm. And what I've had to somewhat reframe in my mind is balancing success for right now, but also setting them up for future success.
Yeah.
So I've already told myself that if I get those kids again in future seasons, I've got to be okay with letting them fail and possibly not winning, because after puberty, that kid may develop into that position. Mm-hmm. They're not there yet, but I can set them up for the future after puberty to at least have the skills to play it, and maybe they end up playing defense their entire career, but by playing midfield or forward at 9 years old, they develop some skills that help them become a better defender in the future. And so that was one that, because I thought I was doing the right thing by putting them in the position that was best for them. And I had to come to the realization that, like, that's good for right now, but it also might hurt long term. And I think that's one of the tensions that as parents we're walking, in terms of, we've got to see the long game. If we're only looking at right now, we're going to parent different than if we look at, okay, my kid is 10 years old now. I want them to be able to do X, Y, and Z by the time they're 18 and they leave my house. Well, that's going to change how we parent at 10, as opposed to thinking, well, my kid's 10. I want them to be the best 10-year-old possible.
Yeah. No, you're right.
Two different approaches.
And if you're thinking to yourself, like, literally think about how crazy this sounds. If you're saying my kid is 10 and my goal for them by 18 is that they're going to be the best pitcher in the world, right? That's the goal. Is that the goal? Because there are so many other character qualities. There are so many other things that we want our kids to be. And we have these, if you are playing travel sports, if you are on the road with your kids, you have all of these touch points, all of these interactions with which you can build character and relationships and comfort and strength and all of these other things. But if all you're doing on those car rides is talking about, your slider looked terrible today, and look at this and look at that, and you did this wrong, you are missing so many touch points that you only get so many by the time they get out of the house. So you really just have to evaluate for yourself. And if their goal is the same as yours, then what you need to do as a parent is find a good coach for your kid. Find the right person to work with your kid, and then you be the cheerleader and you be the support person.
I love that. I agree with that. And one of the things I say a lot is, I don't know where the study came from. I don't know where I heard it, but it's the idea that our brains need to hear 8 to 10 positive interactions to make up for one negative one. And when I've shared that before, people have responded by saying, like, we're just going to make them soft, or like, that's why kids are so soft today. And that's all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So before we leave, because we've got to get out of here, as a psychologist, as the trained professional in this conversation that knows more than me and likely knows more than the listener, because this is your specialty, can you tell us why it is so important for us to be the positive speaker in our kids' life, as opposed to being the one that always is trying to, at best, coach, at worst, critique?
Yeah. So this is actually a conversation that I have with parents nearly every day, because that is the concept, right? I'm bribing my child. If I'm giving them all of this reinforcement, then I'm not teaching them to be tough. And one of the thing for us to know about reinforcement is that the world runs on reinforcement. All of us are reinforced all the time. And if you think about this, if you had a boss that walked around behind you all day pointing out the things that you did wrong. So there's a typo in that report. You dropped that paper and didn't pick it up. I saw that you spent 10 minutes in the bathroom today. I really hate how you do this. You would hate that job and you would quit that job. There's not enough money in the world to keep me there. But if I have a boss who sends me an email during the day and says, you're an important part of this company, I saw that you did that really well. I really appreciate that you were working hard on that project that I put you on. You'd probably want to stick with that boss. And I wouldn't do my job, as much as I love it, if I didn't get paid for it. And reinforcement is something that's going to be a part of your child's life as they become an adult. Right now, they're reinforced by their grades, they're reinforced by your praise and attention, they're reinforced by social status and popularity. There's a lot of different things that can be reinforcing. But what we have to do as parents is be very intentional in what we reinforce, especially when it comes to athletics. So you don't have to tell your kid, and I advise you not to, that you're the best kid on the team, you really should have been playing, those kind of backhanded compliments or things that are putting them in this mindset of I have to be the best in order to get mom and dad's attention. Rather, if we focus on the things that they can control and we use our reinforcement and our praise in that way, being a good teammate, working hard, having a good attitude, as I've mentioned over and over again, these are the things that we should be praising, and those are the things that translate to adulthood. That our voice becomes our child's inner voice. Our critiques become our child's critiques of themselves. Our praise and our conceptualization of what they're good at becomes their conceptualization of what they're good at. And if you are focusing on the negative, if your touch points with them are predominantly negative versus reinforcing and positive, then that's what's going to become their inner thoughts. That's it. It's as simple as that. Good. And there's science to back it up, days and days and days, years and years and years. There's so much science to back up the power of reinforcement and of praising your kids. It's just so important. I don't understand how anybody could fight on that, but what do I know? I just studied it forever.
And have the degree and the word doctor in front of your name.
I'm very passionate about this subject, if you couldn't tell.
Really? No.
Yeah. My husband was like, I can't wait to hear this because, like, I know you have a lot of thoughts about this. And in watching the changing landscape of Division I athletics, my husband works at a Power 4 school. And in watching the landscape and as it changes, I have so much input from a mental health perspective and a psychological perspective. And one of the things that we, my private practice has been able to do is now we are doing some testing with the athletes, and we are providing kind of performance profiles, right? These are your strengths. These are your cognitive strengths from a psychological perspective in the testing that we do. So that means this is how you learn the best. This is how you would perform. This is how you should advise your coach to teach you and talk to you and all of those things. So it's a kind of an untapped area. Not a lot of people are doing it, but we feel like it's important not only to give academic recommendations for the student athletes who need them, but also performance related.
I think the biggest leaps we're going to make in athletics in general, not just youth sports specifically, but athletics in general, is as we are able to integrate the mental side of things more and more. Now that the stigma that was around the psychology of sport has gone away or is going. It's not completely gone away, but now that more and more people are open to understanding the way the brain works, I think that's going to be the thing that, to use your word, unlocks so much of the potential for our kids, just as in recreation youth sports, in high school sports, in college. Like, if we can understand how our kids are wired and the psychology needed to relate to them on their level, that's going to be what allows us to parent them in the most healthy way possible. but it requires us to learn things different than the way we were raised.
And to be uncomfortable in that moment, right? To reflect on, like you said earlier, the things that you've done in the past that maybe weren't the best things. And to be able to say, you know what, now that I know better, I'm going to have to do better.
And give yourself grace in that. Because if you didn't know any better, how can you do better?
Right.
But
and
now that you do know better.
Yeah, all we've seen is generations before us, right? Like my husband always talks fondly about a coach he had that was really, really hard on him. And I see some of that coming out in his coaching style. And it's important to also be, direct and blunt when you're the coach and focus on things the kids need to work on. But we only know what we've seen before. And if you've seen a really unhealthy relationship with sports, you're going to naturally fall into those patterns. It's really important for you to be able to say, okay, this is how I can be better.
Dr. Wallace, thank you so much. This has been great. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. Have a good day.
Thank you. That's it for this week. Next week, we're going to be talking to the incredible David Gerson. You may not know that name, but if you're on social media, you may have seen the account Refs Need Love 2 on TikTok or Threads. That is David. David is going to let us know all the things your kid's official wishes you knew while they were playing the game. So it's an incredible conversation with him. If you like the show, please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, it would be a giant help if you wrote up a small review. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit that like and that subscribe button. Like we always ask, though, if this episode helped you, the biggest way you can help us is by sharing this episode with a friend so that they can enjoy it too. Most of all, enjoy the time this week you get to be your kid's parent. Enjoy practice, enjoy the games. Just enjoy this time with your kids. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you again soon.